when I would swatch them, they would end up being completely different than what I thought they would swatch like. We're back for more. Today I am going to do a deeper dive into the brand new Natasha Denona Roxa palette. Now, a couple of days ago I posted the title is First Look Natasha Denona Roxa palette because I had just enough time to get one play sesh in with it, so I turned on the camera and started filming. But today I have more in-depth swatches, some comparisons. I'm going to test even more colors that I didn't get to test the first time. So we have a couple more looks coming for you today. So it's a deeper dive into the new holiday collection palette from Natasha Denona, the Roxa palette. So you can get this right now on the Natasha Denona website. It is $69. Good news, codes are now activated. For some reason, the first day that I posted about it, my code wasn't working to give you guys a discount, but now it is working, so you're able to get 15% off on the Natasha Denona website with code morganturner. I highly recommend ordering from the Natasha Denona website because they package the palettes the best. Like, I've never had anything come broken from the website. They completely wrap it in bubble wrap, unlike some other brands, some other companies. And I ordered mine yesterday morning and it arrived this morning, like within 24 hours is what I'm trying to say. So the shipping on Natasha Denona for me is chef's kiss. I didn't even pay for expedited shipping, and I got expedited shipping. And if you missed the whole saga, I ordered this palette as soon as I could, but then right after I ordered it, like 2 hours later, it showed up in PR, which I'm so grateful for. But of course, you know, I was gonna purchase it for myself anyways. And then also good news about where this is available. It's now available at Sephora. So if you do like to utilize Sephora for returns and whatnot, I'll have the link down for that in the description box. It will also eventually be coming to Ulta. And if you want to hold off and get a Sephora discount for the Sephora sale, there also is that option. But like I said, Morgan Turner will save you 15% off. All right, one thing to note about this palette is that it is limited edition for the holiday season. Natasha Denona normally does stay true to that. Occasionally, she will relaunch a palette for a little bit if it sells well, but I do believe in that this will be limited edition, especially given the fact that this is such a bold color story. The launch of this was also inspired by the Lila palette, which was one of Natasha Denona's first kind of purpley style palettes, and it's in her old packaging now. It is an outdated palette if you ask me, so we've gotten an extension to that, and it is like the new midi style. I want to go into the swatches and the formulas, so let's take a look. When you order the palette, it's going to come in just this plain purple box, really nothing to it. The palette has a 24-month shelf life and is made in Italy. If you look here, we have the explanation of all of the shades, and then each shade has an ingredient list. Now, the packaging has this beautiful waved texture. It's not as blue as it seems. The sky is right next to me, so it's reflecting off the sky. But it's actually really just purple with a very, very subtle duochrome. Really simple. I like the texture. ND Roxa palette. And then with it being the midi style, you can take a pin and poke through the colors and you can mix and match, which I love about the midi palettes. Now I'm filming this on my iPhone because I feel like this is how I can get the most true to color, true to life to come through the camera. A lot of you guys were concerned that this palette seemed a little bit too pink, and I feel like it is much less pink in person. So you have these three shades, particularly these two, that are going to pull a little bit more on the pink warm side. But if you just take those out, I mean, a couple of the shimmers are pink, but pink is quite flattering and makes it very easy to blend out purple. So I don't mind that so much. I think it looks less pink in person than it has looked through the promo photos. Now, this palette is featuring a brand new matte formulation. All of the mattes are a new silky matte formula, which I was very worried about debuting a whole new matte formula because I enjoyed hers before. But she said she did that because purple shades can be more difficult to blend. They can be patchy, which is a fact. And I think she did a great job. Luckily, I tested this yesterday and they blend easily. You can build up the pigment pretty easily as well. This palette is featuring 2 sparkling foiled shades, 2 duochromes, one of which is that graphic design shade as she calls it right here. 1 metallic, 1 wet effect, 1 crystal sparkling topper. So lots of different shimmer formulas here and 8 silky mattes. So we're going to start off by swatching the top row. We have Dixie, one of the crystal sparkling formulas. Jacaranda, a silky matte. Flutter is a sparkling wet. This one feels really nice. And Phoebe is a soft matte light lilac. So here is how they look on my fingers. Again, we have Dixie, the Jacaranda, Flutter, and Phoebe. And that purple swatch, not amazing, but it is amazing when applied to the eyelid. Next we have Regal, which is just a metallic shade. Eclipse is a silky matte. Stargirl is a sparkling foiled duochrome. Bolt is a sparkling foiled duochrome in that graphic designed formulation. Here's Stargirl. Do you see that little bit of duochrome? Stargirl's supposed to be pink with a bronze champagne shift. Now you'll notice a lot of these shimmers are swatching weak. I noticed that yesterday when I was using it as well, which is very out of character for Natasha Denona. So this definitely has set some worry in for me because there's no denying, like these are swatching very weak and it's Natasha Denona. Even this Bolt shade, which is the most eye-catching part of the palette, it's like a violet and silver that you can customize. It looks weak. Now we have Heather, which is more of a rose, and then Cerise, which is more of like a little bit more purple in there, but it is quite warm. Sweet Pea, which is a silky matte. All 3 of those were silky mattes. And then Concord, which is a sparkling foiled. I feel like these first 2 I'm swatching really set the tone for people thinking that this palette was really pink. I mean, don't get me wrong, these are pink, but you know, a couple of shimmers are pink as well. But for the most part, the mattes are pretty purple. This Concord shade is by far the best quality swatching shade in this palette in terms of shimmers. Then the final 3, Velour is a silky matte, Brink is a sparkling foiled, and then Orchid is another silky matte. I feel like these mattes swatch really beautifully, and this shade looks quite nice as well. And this is the whole palette. Obviously, this side's pulling a little bit more pink, but even these shades, like they do have a purple tone to them. They're not super pink. It's just these 2 as far as the mattes and these 2 as far as the shimmers. But overall, the mattes swatch beautifully. However, the shimmers are leaving some room for worry. I did use a few yesterday. They applied nicely, but I want to experiment a little bit more today. A major concern of mine, even still after using this yesterday, are the shimmers. The shimmers that I used yesterday looked really beautiful on the eyelid. They applied relatively well. There is a difference between this new age Natasha Denona formula and the old age OG Natasha Denona formula. Those are just creamier and wetter, and more than ever, I noticed that the shimmers are very, very dry via swatch and just not as thick and creamy or pigmented. These seem to be a little bit more about the sparkle effect, which I will say is more trendy now. And while I didn't have many problems in the last video creating the look, I need to play with some more, really collect my thoughts, because you used to be able to use Natasha Denona shimmers with a brush. Now they are best applied with a finger, if you ask me, at least the ones that I used yesterday. I will say, yesterday's look that I did, though, was stunning. It was an all-purple look. I made the decision to go as purple as I could yesterday, so today, on one eye, I want to go as pink as I can, and then just really play with the colors that I haven't gotten a chance to. But if you're looking for a good look, check out my first video on this palette. I love that look so much. So we'll do this eye first. I'm just using some ABH eye primer. I like this primer for palettes like this and color stories like this because it lightens up the eyelid, which is going to help the colors look more even on the eyelids as well as have as much vibrancy as possible. So yesterday my goal was to get as pretty of a look as possible using the purples. Right now my goal is just to see how pink we can get with this palette. Because a lot of people are turned off by the pink in this palette. I don't mind it, but it is pink looking. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of Sweet Pea just to kind of be our base color. I'm trying to get as warm, pinky, and rosy as we can, but actually this color Sweet Pea is quite cool toned, and I do see a lot of purple to it. It's not as pink as it looks in the pan. And that's just to get a little bit of color down, because instantly my eyes are going down to this quad right here. So I'm going to take some of Heather. And this is a rosy shade is how I would describe it. Now, one thing you need to be careful about, for some reason, if anybody is a camera expert, let me know. I feel like warm shades pull extra warm on my camera. So I feel like the shade's a little less warm than it's pulling on camera, but it is a warm shade. Your eyes do not deceive you. So I'm putting this warm rose on the inner corner. This new Silky Matte formulation, by the way, is stunning. It's a great addition to her line. If she replaced all of her mattes with this formula, I wouldn't be mad. It's like the regular creamy matte, just really good. I'm going to take some of Orchid, and I'm going to pop that right next to Heather to see if there's a difference in shade. This one carries more depth for shoresies. And I'm doing this gradient style because it allows me to see shades next to each other to make sure they differ from one another, and also to test as many shades as possible, which is the goal for the looks in this video. Just trying to test as much as I can. So Orchid, do you think it's different enough from Heather? Heather's definitely more light, but they aren't super different. I think diffused on the lid. If I really packed on the pigment, I feel like there would be a little bit more of a difference, but diffused, they aren't, you know, with their own personality. Okay, and then Cerise right here. I don't even know how to describe this. She says it's a medium dark muted FUCH. Is that a typo? Is it a fuchsia? Anyways, this has way more warmth than Orchid. I can see right away. It has more pink to it as well, but overwhelmingly so. It's very rosy looking right now. I feel like if she had replaced Cerise and Heather, the opinions about the pink would be completely different. I don't know that she needed all three because they're kind of, I am blending them together, but they're kind of doing the same thing, no? Let me put a little bit more Cerise on. Okay, I was able to knock out 3 of the matte shades. There are 8. There's a lot, which I like because I think normally that means more versatility in a palette. And the more that I'm layering on Cerise, I feel like the more purple it's becoming, by the way, which is strange, but that's what's happening. Okay, this is my bad eye, so it never looks as blended. It's the eye's fault, not me. Okay, I'm just getting all of these to blend out. Okay. The real test, the real concern here are the shimmers for me. This Dixie shade seemed so unbelievably dry via swatch. I'm just going to take a little bit of Regal. This one is like a normal metallic shade. It's like a rose shade. I'm just popping this right here and right here. That's quite pinky. Okay. But this Dixie shade, crystal sparkling, warm pink with blue and purple specks. Needs a finger to be applied. Let's see. So this is going to give more of a galactic look. You can see my skin underneath. It's swatched pretty pathetic, you guys, but maybe it's because I have the studio lights in front of me, but it actually is really beautiful. These are applying much prettier than they swatched. I don't even mind that you can see my skin underneath because this is giving the effect of a topper shade. It's a little bit more, as I said, galactic and ethereal, which is what is in style right now. And the blue is really a nice touch here to create a different effect on the eye. Okay, yay. That didn't turn out bad. I'm not mad. Okay, let me just bring back some of that crease color action. And then, let's see what Brink, I haven't used this one yet, what Brink does. Okay, this one is applying nice. Again, it's more scattered. You know how Hourglass has those scattered light shadows? That's kind of how I feel the glimmers are in this palette. This palette has more like scattered glitter style reflex as opposed to just being like really thick and creamy, and it's not so much about the metallicness with this palette. These shades have that scattered effect. So, at the end of it all, it's not turning out as tragic as I was worried it could be, so that's good. But is this the best Natasha Denona quality palette I've ever used in my entire life? Probably not, but, well, definitely not. But it's not bad. I'm not getting as much depth with this cerise shade as I was hoping for. I'm just trying to build it up, and the depth really isn't building up as much as I would like. Like this shade, Eclipse, gives me so much depth, and I feel like cerise just isn't getting past a medium level. And for lower lash, we're gonna start off with Orchid, and I'm running this along the inner half of my lower lash line. This one is the more purple of that trio of warm mattes. You can see the purple coming through here, and then cerise. So you can get a pink look with this palette, but I had to be very selective in the shades that I used. But it definitely contains some pinks here. Then I want to use Flutter. And this is a very scattered sparkle shade, but not chunky at all. It's similar to that lovely sparkle formula that you'll find in the Makeup by Mario palette. And then I'm going to layer a little bit of Dixie, which feels like it's getting hard panned. That's the nature of the formula, but that's why a finger is best. It's a little thicker in the chunks you get from there. But that'll bring in some blue down below. But because Orchid mostly ran the bottom lash line, it looks more purple on the bottom lash line. And when you get lashes and stuff, this looks going to turn out pretty cool. So I have officially used every shade in this palette now. So let's have a little fun with this last look. Let's take a mixture of Sweet Pea. No, we're going to start with just Sweet Pea. And I'm going to blend this all over the crease. I have to do a halo eye. This palette is literally begging me to create a halo eye with it. So I must. Just starting off the crease here. Taking a slightly smaller brush, we're focusing in on velour, which you can see is a little bit deeper. Also in the purple family. And the reason why I'm really emphasizing saying this is purple, this is pink, is because of how it's pulling in person versus my fear of how it's pulling on camera, since I feel like my camera has a tendency to pull warmer, like I said. Like this is a purple color family. Okay, and then an even smaller brush. I want to take cerise. We'll warm it up. For fun, I still want to play with these warmer shades a bit. And then also mix them in with some of the purples to see how that goes. So you see this one is just not giving me the depth that I thought I was going to get. But it still is quite vibrant and pretty. You can always like dip back into shades like Sweet Pea to blend out the edges. Okay, even smaller brush. And we're going into Eclipse. I'm using a very light hand because this shade is very pigmented. One thing that I'm very much enjoying about this palette compared to the most recent Natasha Denona palettes is we're getting a lot more versatility in this palette as far as the looks that you can create. I felt like the last few palettes that have launched, especially in the I Need A line, a lot of the shades were so much in a similar color story that you could only get so many looks with a palette. Like I felt like when I would do 3 looks, all 3 looks more or less look the same. I at least feel like the looks I'm getting here, all three have had their own personality, and there's more that I can think of. Like, I wanted to do a little bit more complex looks today, but I plan on playing around to see exactly how wearable I can get some of these looks. And isn't this shade amazing? These shades can be really patchy and difficult to blend, but not in this case. Next, I'm taking just a little bit of Concord. This is probably the best quality shimmer in this palette in terms of the amount of pigment that you get, but you can see it still has that scattered sparkle effect, and I'm kind of putting this on the edge of the inner part of the halos that I've added, so I'm not going all the way to the inner and outer corner, but I'm slowly placing it towards the middle as we get brighter. Unfortunately, this shade that was so cool, it did disappoint me. It looks very pretty, but it's very hard to pick up a lot of the pigment. You have to keep layering it, and you can check out my last tutorial to see how that works, because I'm not going to put it on, but that's the only one where I was like, Okay, I'm gonna see Flutter, because I really want to see how this looks on a larger part of the eye. It is so pretty though. Lots of sparkles in this one. It's not adhering as well as I would have liked, but this is a great topper shade to give that overall sparkly effect. Okay, but it's not adhering. There is no stick or creamy feeling to it. It's a little bit slick, and I am seeing that in application, if I'm being honest. If you want the full opacity that you can get with this, glitter glue is what it's gonna have to be. So because of that, I am gonna layer just a little bit of Stargirl, because Stargirl has lighter reflex, which is really gonna brighten this up just a little bit. Taking a little bit of Regal and brightening up the inner corner and the brow bone here, kind of wiping away those loose glimmers as well. For lower lash line, I'm taking a little bit of cerise, and I'm just slightly going to blend it a little bit lower than I normally would, because I do want it to carry through from the bottom to the top, but it's just going to be very subtle. Using one of the new Esum brushes. I just love them. Okay, so almost make yourself look sick, a little pink-eyed with how low you're blending it. Okay, and then taking a little bit of velour to bring back some of that purple hue. Just a little bit. This is not the focus of the look. I only wanted cerise slightly peeking through to the bottom. And then I'm taking a pencil brush because I want to be a little bit more careful. We're going into Eclipse. And Eclipse is just going to be a staple color for this palette. There's so many ways that one can use it. You see how I'm leaving the center of the eye open for what exactly I did on the top. Flutter, that sparkled effect, and then just for a little bit more contrast, Stargirl, because it has more bright shimmers in there. I love this look too. I have to be very careful when I do this, but we're taking Eclipse, tapping off the brush of excess, and press that into the lash line. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but we're just gonna try it. I'm taking some of cerise. What happens? Oh, no, that's good. That's gonna give pink eye real fast. So we're actually just gonna go into Eclipse here as well. But this one I'm gonna blend a bit. What I mean by that, taking a blending brush and making it kind of a smudgy liner. And this particular look calls for a wing, if you ask me, so I'm gonna add that too. Okay, let me pop on some lashes and finish the rest of my makeup, and you'll see how these two came together. So I just put on an Ardell Demi Wispy, no crazy lashes or anything, so you could really see the looks, but oh, I love how they turned out. Both of them are very beautiful. I will say the first look I did is still my favorite. but I can think of more looks that I want to make with this palette, which excites me. So before I get into my final closing thoughts, I of course did some highly requested comparisons for you guys, because I did feel like when this palette launched at first, I was like, ooh, yay! And then I like really thought about it and really looked at it and I was like, maybe I've seen this before from Natasha Denona. It really was reminding me a lot of the Love palette in particular. So I put them side by side and here is how it turned out. Now, immediately when I saw the Roxa palette, it brought me straight to the Love palette, because I think the Love palette had that strong purple to pink kind of color story. So I wanted to show you them side by side, and even looking at them side by side, I'm like, these look pretty close. But when I swatched, I really noticed the difference. The Love palette is so much more peachy and warm and pink. The Roxa palette actually looks extra purple compared to the Love palette. Now, I don't mind it being kind of close to the Love palette because the Love palette was limited edition from years ago and honestly not that great of a formula. So I feel like this is a bit of a redemption story if I'm being honest. So at the top, I have the Roxa swatches, and at the bottom, I have the Love palette swatches. And don't get me wrong, there are some similarities, but I struggle to find a lot of the purple shades to match up to the Roxa palette. These warm shades are pretty close, but other than that, there really are not that many differences. I will say these shimmers from the Love, they're more creamy, they're more pigmented. Look how much more oomph they have compared to the shimmers of the Roxa palette. But overwhelmingly, the shades were pulling much more peach. So these are more different than I anticipated, which is great news. In case you needed it, here is the My Dream palette next to Roxa. The My Dream palette is so much more neutral when you compare them side by side. It has those more orangey kind of style transition matte shades. These, if you ask me, are really not the same at all, nor worth comparing. Now here's the retro palette. Honestly, I thought these would look a lot more similar than they did. I would say there's probably 5 shades worth swatching side by side, but I decided against it because look how warm and rosy the retro palette looks compared to the new palette. You know, whenever I look at the retro palette, I think to myself that this palette is like almost so purple and mauve. No, not at all. I mean, right next to the Roxa palette, it looks like a warm palette, which I think is quite crazy. Obviously, I'm going to Heather and Cerise, and that's where I'm seeing the similarities. But if you take those out and maybe 1 or 2 of the shimmers, there really is nothing else that is similar. So quite different when you put them side by side. And of course, I had to compare to the original big Lila palette. Now, the Lila is what actually inspired the Roxa palette, so I expected there to be similarities. And gosh, Natasha really loves a warm twist to her palettes, because this is so much more warm than even this palette. Like, the more I'm comparing this palette, the more purple it's looking to me. And so I found a lot of shades to swatch side by side, but when I would swatch them, they would end up being completely different than what I thought they would swatch. Like, again, you can see these are just a more buttery formulation. I'm getting so much more pigment, which makes me sad. Look how like piecey and glittery these top ones look, which is not a bad thing, but it's different. But there's not a single shade that looks close to another shade, so they're completely different palettes, which I'm sure Natasha was looking into when she was creating this palette, considering that Lila was the inspiration, but even more different than I thought. Oh my gosh. Pleasantly surprised at how different I feel this palette is compared to the ones that I showed you. It's much more different than I expected. Now, it's like a very purple palette. If you are a neutral wearer, you might want to pause on this one and wait for the next one. I always say Natasha Denona appeases everybody, so she comes out with a lot of neutral palettes, and she's been coming out with color palettes as well. I do think it has lessened, but this was much needed. We definitely wanted some color this time, and we absolutely got it. So finally, for my color lovers, there is a new palette if this is a color that you're into. And surprisingly different seeing it side by side from the other palettes. It looked even more purple compared to those, right? Now, my final thoughts about this palette. Overall, I do think the quality is very nice. It's not classic Natasha Denona quality. The shimmers I feel like are a little bit different this time, and I don't want to say they're bad because they're not. All of them still applied pretty beautifully to my eyelid. It's just different. So if you like the creaminess, the thickness, the strong opacity of other shimmers from Natasha Denona, just know you're not getting it in this palette. The new matte formulas are stunning, really buttery, easy to use. For me, this isn't a palette that I feel needs to be in the permanent line. I think it is a great, as it is, limited edition holiday palette. And if it is a color story that you think you're going to wear, that is valuable in your collection, and you enjoy the color story, then I would give you the thumbs up to go ahead and grab it. Maybe on sale, like I said, Sephora sale or with a discount code. But I'm really happy with this. I think this was a great palette for them to add to their line. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I hope that my swatches were helpful to you in making your decision on whether or not you need this palette or not. So many great launches have come out recently, so I've been really excited about this one. So if you aren't already, make sure you're subscribed to my channel for more reviews and more thoughts on all of the new makeup on the market right now. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye guys, have a good one.